Hello there. Welcome to Intercept CSA, the podcast, where we break harmful silence with truth, healing, and protection, one conversation at a time. I'm Inifon Samson, your host and guide for this conversation. Thank you for joining me. If you have parents or people caring for children around you, do make an extra effort to have them listening. Place your devices beside them. Invite them to lean in. Every bit of awareness counts for children. Now, a gentle reminder before we go any further. This conversation might be triggering. Remember to breathe, pause, and do what feels safe to you before you return. Hi, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm really glad to have you here, especially for this conversation. Today, we are talking about the other end of a disclosure, seeing the child before the case. The thing is that I thought long and hard about the best way to communicate the weight of this episode to you. I remembered a few people who trusted me with the moment of their disclosure, and I actually thought about asking them if they'd be willing to share their stories with you, just so you can hear it in real time, beyond examples and all of that. Yet, as always, I pulled myself back from being the force demanding a storyteller out of a person who probably just wants to get back into their lives and leave everything behind. Because storytelling doesn't equate power for everyone. For some people, leaving behind their stories is how they strip it of its power. So I turned to myself, because I know that each time I tell my story, as difficult as it is, it restores yet another piece of what was stolen. I'm presently putting the finishing strokes to my memoir, and like I've said a couple of times, I want the first rendering of my story to be through writing. But today, I feel the release to share this, with the hope that it will help you get right into the mind of a child, walk in her shoes as she navigates disclosure, and hopefully it will help you understand why I'm making an argument for you to see the child before the case. Listen to this excerpt from my memoir. Some lines will be slightly modified and some characters or places will be marked X, but the heart of the piece remains. This is about 7 chapters into the story. By afternoon the next day, the door of my brother's room opened. Inifon, come to the parlor, my mother said. She'd left early for a meeting at X and I'd heard her return. Now she sat in my father's wooden chair in the sitting room. Her mouth tightened into a pout as I lowered into the plastic chair she pointed to. There's something I have heard in Infon. I don't know if she said that to warn me not to lie or to set the foundation for the conversation. Has any man touched you before? I didn't deny it. When she asked who it was, I gave her the same name I gave X. I didn't mention there were other details too. Then came the flood of questions, all over again. How did something like that happen? Why didn't you mention it to me? Where did it happen? How could that boy have done that after everything we did for him? What did he use? What if he? She could not bring herself to process the reality that things could have been much worse, as serious as the embarrassment of a teenage pregnancy. My mother always sat tall, always carried herself with distinction. But that day, she looked bent over. I was tired. My body was tired of carrying that secret. Tired of the shame that had become second skin. What I needed was for her to hold me. I needed someone to sweep in and help me. I wanted to tell her that I developed an unexplainable pelvic pain, that now I was haunted by these images, that I lived in my head perpetually, and if I made any mistake, my mind stayed on it like a ceaseless loop and wouldn't let me get past it. That I'd seen myself as someone I never imagined. That I have been scared for a long time and I had not known how to tell her, because every day this bag of secrets became heavier than what I wanted to or what I could drop on her, and that even now I'd still kept back some. But I looked at my mother's face and she was jammed, completely swept away by the current of information I had just hit her with. She'd masked the maternal feelings of loss and failure with anger and disappointment. can imagine that for people that have had a lived experience of child sexual abuse, that excerpt was hard to listen to. And I wish I could tell you that my story is rare, that most children who tell their stories are met with open arms, or they are met with people who instantly see that is a child in need. But many times that's not what happens. I find that when it comes to disclosures, the case of child sexual abuse often precedes the child who has been abused. And that can present itself in different forms. Whether it's the fact that the adult is weighed down by the information, angered by it, or just trying to manage their shock, fear, and shame throughout the process. It's just rarely a case where somebody says, oh my goodness, this thing has happened and my child needs me. It's more often a crisis, something that has landed in the middle of everybody's already full life, and something that we need to take care of. In a more informed space, a more informed family situation, a disclosure means we have to get to the police station quickly. We have to take the child to the hospital, or we have to schedule a meeting with our pastor or a counselor or a therapist. And all of these are important and necessary. But do you see how the child can disappear in the middle of this story? How the crime and the offender can take center stage and the child becomes a background. Like the night of my first telling, where my mother went to bed seething in anger at this person, and I lay on my side in my room, unable to sleep, because someone knowing had only worsened everything. It hadn't changed anything. And in all the stories I've heard from people who disclosed as children, not one person has told me someone hugged me. No one person has told me someone just sat with me in the silence. What I have heard is someone panicked. Someone rushed me to the hospital. Someone went to the police. So today's episode is our attempt to fill a gap in conversation, especially conversations around disclosure. It is not about the legal steps or the medical protocols that follow disclosures, even though we'll touch on that. And all of them matter, absolutely. But in this conversation, our focus will be on the child who is disclosing and what that child needs in that time of disclosure. It is an invitation for us to see the core of disclosures, which is the fact that a child is handing you the most fragile truth that they have. So before we dive in, I want you to hold on to a few foundational keys. Because in Nigeria and here in Akwa Ibom State where we are situated, many times we've actually witnessed disclosures. But because culture has twisted its meaning, we're unable to see it. And then the result is that we blame the child, or we soften the crime, or even erase it completely. So these keys will help you to block those ideas before they corrupt your response. It's more like the launching pad for your ability to respond effectively. And my first key to build the foundation for effective response is that you must understand what child sexual abuse really is. Because if you think that child sexual abuse is something that a child and an adult did, or you see child sexual abuse as your child being careless with their body or bringing you disgrace, then you will treat disclosures like a confession. And what do we do when people confess? We punish them. We mete out some disciplinary action to them. We shame them. We don't protect people who confess. And this is at the root of so many first telling stories that I've heard, including mine. Many times the first person who hears the abuse, who receives that information of the abuse, misnames the abuse as a secret relationship. They treat the disclosure like two consenting adults who just got caught. So know what child sexual abuse is about first. If you haven't already listened to episode 1 and 2 of this podcast, I would suggest that you listen to it after this particular episode, because they break down the meaning and the nature of child sexual abuse, including the vulnerabilities of children, in a way that will change how you think about abuse. In those episodes too, you will hear us establish something that I don't think we can repeat enough, and that is the fact that there can be no consensual sexual relationship between an adult and a child. There's no consent. So knowing that simple truth will sharpen your ability to spot abuse and to respond to a disclosure with the kind of sensitivity that it deserves. As I've grown up, I've realized that many children we call bad girls or bad boys or picking with them, I don't tear, all of those things we used to say, were actually abuse cases. If we had known this then, our instincts would have moved us to protect, would have seen that old man and that little girl and would not have been looking at that child like, you started to follow man. You would have seen that this is someone taking advantage of a child. So yes, effective response begins with knowledge. If you don't understand CSA, you will miss disclosures. Another key that I want to leave with us or begin this episode with is when it comes to disclosures, remember this guiding principle. The child's safety and emotional well-being comes before everything else, even before your need for answers, sometimes even before your need for justice. Because it's easy to tip to one extreme or to the other. It's easy to make it all about gathering the facts of the abuse or to rush headfirst into anger and retaliation and action. But a disclosure is not an excavation. It is your opportunity to show your child three things. It is to show your child that you believe them, an opportunity to show your child that they did the right thing by telling you, and it's an opportunity to show them that you will do everything you can to keep them safe, and you will do it from a grounded and rational place, including making sure that the offender is held accountable. So we lose so much when we shift the focus away from the child. And many times CSA conversations are about the perpetrator, about society, about the failures in the system, which are all important, but they should not be the immediate main focus of a disclosure. Because at the center of every CSA case is a child whose world has been turned upside down. The third key I also want to share is know that the child might not tell you everything. And this information is not so that you can push the details out of them. It is so you can remember that disclosures are a process. So many times children need time to trust you with the whole story. And some may not even still tell you the entire detail at the end of the day. Maybe because they're embarrassed, or maybe they don't think it is important to them telling their stories, or maybe they just want to move forward. Whatever the reason, the safest thing you can do is to be a steady ground, to be a steady presence. Even if you're shocked, even if you're confused, even if you're overwhelmed, it's important that your steadiness becomes what they can lean on, because their sense of safety is already shaken. In this episode, I'm focusing mainly on family-based disclosures, because I believe that even if the first telling happens at a school, in church, or somewhere else, it usually circles back home, unless the child is in maybe a shelter. But many of these principles will still help you, whether you are a teacher, a Sunday school leader, or in other child-saving organizations. Along with your organizational protocols, all of this will also help. It will completely shift how you respond to disclosures. So what do you do from the moment a child tells you? The truth is, your response as the first listener can either kickstart that child's healing or set it back. That's how powerful your role is. From the moment that a child breaks their silence, every reaction you have shifts the direction of their recovery, either forward or backward. So first thing, stay calm. I know it will be hard, maybe even the hardest thing you've ever done, but that child needs you to be steady. Because when our reactions take center stage, we force the child who just made one of the hardest decisions of their lives, we force them to begin to navigate our emotions. Instead of resting on us for support, we start to try to pacify us. And I've seen this happen so many times. A child discloses, and rather than being comforted, they become the ones comforting and apologizing to other people for the distress that they've caused. Now, they're now the ones afraid that they've upturned everything. And a child's ability to rest on us is important, because when a child is telling you their story, they're still trying to make sense of what they've said. They're still trying to understand the cost of their telling. And if your reaction screams panic, disbelief, or rage, you can actually slam the door shut on their willingness to share more, which is why I mentioned that the disclosure is a process, meaning that you are just at the beginning, you're just at the door of a very long road. So now let's say that they've just finished telling you their story. The next most important thing you can do is to make sure that they feel safe. You can say things like, I believe you. That's a very important thing to say, very affirming thing to say of their story. I believe you. I'm proud of you for telling me this. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. And then allow space within that moment of disclosure. Allow a space for silence. If they're okay in that silence, you can hug them and just hold them. Some children will continue to share more if you allow space for silence. Other children might use that space to just express their anger at the fact that you didn't notice. But space can be helpful. And my principle with this immediate moment of disclosure is that the key is to deal with your child according to their unique personalities and the unique needs that you can read off of them in that moment. As someone that has had some time in childcare, I know that not every child wants to be comforted in the same way. I know not every child wants hugs. Some children want hugs. Some children don't. Some may want you to just sit beside them. Some may decide to return to their room right after telling you. So the key is to let the child's needs lead the moment, not your need to do something. Because as adults, in a bid to escape a discomfort, sometimes we feel it with activity. We feel that kind of a moment with activity. But remember that CSA steals agency. CSA steals the right to self, that sense of I own myself and I own what has happened in this space. So even in your response, it's important that you make room to restore that. You make room to hand back that child the ability to choose how they navigate their stories. Also, if you need to ask questions, make sure that they are open and gentle. Ask questions like, can you tell me what happened? How did you feel when that happened? Where did that happen? Who was there? Has this happened before? Don't ask for the child to describe exactly what happened or the methods. Those may come out during the process of telling, but often that is wrapped in a lot of shame. So except the child tells you those details themselves, don't ask it as a direct question. And you don't just want to bring that shame into that moment. So allow the child tell their story in their own words, at their own pace. Don't back them into a corner. Don't make your words into accusations. Understand too that sometimes, no matter how gentle and open your questions are, it can still feel like it's too much at first. And that is okay. Some children, like I said, need to feel safe before they can start talking in detail. It is also important to know that if the disclosure happens the same day as the abuse, medical help is urgent. It's urgent that you take that child to the hospital if the abuse happened on that same day. And it's not just about collecting evidence for the legal process. It is about protecting that child's health because you don't know what was the state of health of the abuser. So things like HIV prevention, emergency contraception, or treatment for injuries, those are things that need to happen quickly. In fact, when I think about the damage that silence does to CSA survivors, I think mostly about health. And in the future, I'll talk more about this because it's something I'm really passionate about. But when a child has the opportunity to report abuse, it is beyond getting it off their chest. It is a protection of their health. It is peace of mind for their future self. So yes, go ahead with those procedures, but through every step, fight for the child to be treated as a human being, not just as a case, and fight to create a space where the child is seen and where the child is centered. Because the children may never say it out loud. They may never have the articulation in this present time to be able to say what they feel in that moment. But that sense of dignity and safety will stay with them. It will become part of the foundation for their healing. I also want us to take a quick look at what to expect medically. I know that if you walk into a standard hospital, you should be able to have all of this information. But I know that there are some parts in the country where you may not have access to the kind of medical care that is optimal. And having all of this information is necessary so that you can advocate for your child. You can insist on what should be done. So I spoke to a doctor here in Nigeria. His name is Dr. Dwak Thompson, and he shared with me a protocol for managing sexual abuse cases. This might not be the same exactly in every single hospital, but the heart of it remains. So he said it usually begins with the careful medical and psychosocial history. then a gentle, thorough perineal examination to check for injuries, changes to the hymen, or other signs of harm. If the abuse was recent, swabs might be collected for laboratory tests, including microscopy, culture, and sensitivity, and then sperm detection. It is also a common thing for the hospital to do blood tests for HIV, which is very necessary, and hepatitis B. He also mentioned that for children who have gone through puberty, emergency contraception may be offered within 72 hours and antibiotics to prevent infection. So you're seeing the time frames and why I said that where you have been able to intercept abuse immediately is important that that child is taken to the hospital for medical check. And I gave that clause because I know that some disclosures are very delayed. They take such a long time. Sometimes a child can be telling you this a year after, 2 years after. The same level of emergency might not exist at that point. That child still needs medical checkup, quite all right. They still need to have psychological evaluation and all of those things. But it's not the same emergency as a child who you meet in the moment of abuse. So still on the process, the guardian is then encouraged, as a guardian, whoever brought this child to the hospital is then encouraged to file a police report. And in many cases, hospitals have links to agencies who can help with that process while the medical side continues. If the results confirm abuse, the case is referred to Child Protection Services for ongoing care, emotional support, and legal follow-up. This will allow for the hospital to be able to collect legal evidence like semen and access the area for trauma, including hymenal disruption. All of that give useful information that will be used in the prosecution. So I think that some of the most important things you want to keep in mind are the HIV test, the hepatitis B test, and just the fact that you want to ask whoever you meet at that point that what are the laboratory tests, what tests should be undergone to make sure that this child is in a good health condition and that this abuse situation has not compromised the child's health. So like I said, this is to allow you to be able to advocate for your child's medical care, for your child's health. In a case where you probably walk into a negligent clinic, you're able to make that advocacy possible for your child. I should also add one more important note, that if you interrupt abuse immediately it happens, don't bathe the child or change their clothes before you take them to see a doctor. That can destroy crucial evidence. And if there are visible injuries, take pictures. Take pictures carefully and respectfully, but take pictures because that may help in court. Also, if you cannot go to a hospital, go to a sexual assault referral center or a trusted NGO that handles CSA cases. They will help you connect to the right services. For example, if you're in Uyo, you can go to University of Uyo Government Teaching Hospital. You can also go to Akwa Ibom State Government Sexual and Gender-Based Violence Response Unit at the Ministry of Justice. You can also contact International Federation of Women Lawyers, FIDA, Uyo branch. You'll find their contact details online. If you're outside Uyo, start with your state government hospital or police station. We may not yet have a perfect crisis response system across the nation, but there is a lot of help available. There's help available. As someone who has received notice of abuse, who is on the other end of the disclosure, the other person that is not a child now, whether it's the mother or maybe you're the father or you're an auntie or whatever relationship tag you have with this child. As someone who is on that end, as someone pursuing the trail created by a child's disclosure, I believe that it's important that you seek support for yourself, because working with a child through something as disheartening as child sexual abuse is a tough process, no matter how prepared you are, especially because you also want to protect that child's privacy, which closes you out of circles you may have immediately had access to. But it's important that you identify someone very trustworthy in your circle and allow them to be available for you. You don't have to tell them the entire information. You don't have to disclose the sensitive information on the abuse to this person, but it's important that you can at least tell somebody that I'm going through something right now and I just need somebody to check on me every now and then. So it's something like that. Now, here's what not to do when a child discloses. I know that I highlighted it already in while I was talking about what to do, but it will be helpful if I quickly go over it all over again. Now, here's what not to do. Don't interrupt. When a child is sharing their story, let them speak at their own pace. Cutting in with questions and interjecting, all of that can shut them down. So try as much as possible not to interrupt. Try as much as possible to not show shock or disgust at them. Manage your face, your tone, your body language, because children are reading all of that. Try to keep your expression calm and steady. Try to keep your reaction calm, even if you're feeling shaken inside. Also, don't ask why questions. Why didn't you tell me this before? Why were you there? All of that sounds like blame, even if you don't mean it that way. So don't ask why questions. Don't try to investigate on the spot. Like I said before, don't turn the moment into an excavation or an interrogation. Don't also promise absolute secrecy. You can promise to support them, but you can't promise to not tell anyone, because their safety may require that you involve the right people. And you promising absolute secrecy is unrealistic, because to get them help, you would need to talk to a doctor, you would need to talk to some social services. So let them know that there will be people who will be helping them, and there will be people who will need the information that you've given to them or that they've given to you about the abuse. Also, don't minimize or dismiss what they've said. Phrases like, "Are you sure?" or "Maybe it was a misunderstanding," all of that can crush their courage to speak again. Don't also make it about your feelings. Don't make it about the fact that they didn't tell you about the abuse. Don't make it about the fact that it's been years and you are just hearing it. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be hurt. It's okay that you could not have imagined that this person would hurt your child. It's okay for all of that emotion to come to the surface. But in that moment, these children need you to hold on to their own feelings first, to prioritize their feelings first, to comfort them first. So it's going to demand a lot of maturity from you. Also, don't confront the alleged abuser yourself, because this can put the child in more danger and compromise any legal process. Somebody who is capable of abuse is capable of a lot of other things. So don't try to confront the abuser yourself or the alleged abuser yourself. Don't also delay in seeking help. Like I said, things like medical care, emotional support, and protection are most times time sensitive. Sometimes an abuser is threatening a child and you will need to involve the police. You will need to involve other forces to keep that person at bay. And waiting can make things harder for that child. Remember that the goal of putting the child first before the case is not so that we can abandon the case. It is so that we don't forget that the main tragedy is not that the balance of justice has been tipped, but that a child's whole world has been overturned or upturned by this imbalance. And we are prioritizing restoring that. Also, don't assume they've told you everything. Like I said, many children share only part of their experience at first. So respect what they've shared and then leave the door open for them to tell you more when they are ready. Also, don't assume a vigilance over the child after the disclosure in a way that communicates that you don't trust them. I know it can be very tempting to become overly protective of children after they've disclosed, but usually that can come off more as a lack of trust or a suspicion rather than love. So definitely tighten your vigilance, but be subtle about it. Do not make the child regret bringing you on board. If you're a coach or mentor or anyone working with children, know that you have a trust that even parents may not have. So guard that trust well and make do on the responsibility of that trust. Remember that how you respond will either open the path for healing or close it for years. Remember that if you're a parent, your child needs to know that they can tell you anything without fear of punishment or of shame. So let your love be a safety net and make sure that they feel it in that moment of disclosure. Also, if you're a teacher, keep your safeguarding protocol close. Most schools have safeguarding protocols. Keep them close. And if your school doesn't have one, advocate for one. In your handling of disclosures, also never promise secrecy. Remember that you will need to involve several people. You will need to communicate back to their families. Very important. The school has a structure. So you have an obligation to report. There are a lot of things. So never promise secrecy. And remember that a disclosure in your classroom might be the child's very first attempt to tell anybody. So handle it in a way that leaves the door open and allows the conversation to continue. If you're also a religious leader, please know that there is a place for spiritual care and there's a place for professional help. I believe that the most God-honoring thing you can do is to protect that child legally and then physically, while still offering the comfort of prayer. If you're a coach or a mentor or somebody that is working with children, know that sometimes you have a trust that even parents may not have. Sometimes children trust you in that sense. So guard that trust well and make do on the responsibility of that trust. Remember that how you respond can either open the path for healing or close it for years. Finally, when a child opens up to you about abuse, whether you're a parent, a coach, a teacher, a mentor, or a friend, you actually become part of their safety net. And that safety net only works if every link is strong. So believe them, stand by them, and help them find help without delay. So the truth is that in the disclosure process, a lot more people become contributors unintentionally. For example, in one child's disclosure process, the first telling may have been to the parent, but a teacher at school may be the quiet source of emotional support that they have. So we all have a role, and often it overlaps in ways that can turn a single disclosure to lasting safety. For this week's call to action, I want you to ask yourself, if a child discloses to me now, is there a protocol within my home, my workplace, school, that will enable me take quick and swift action? If there is, reevaluate it. If there is none and you have the power to establish it, go ahead and do that this week. If you work within an establishment and can't make decisions on your own, make that your contribution at the next meeting and follow up consistently until something changes for the sake of children. I'm looking forward to our next episode because I'll be talking about something very interesting, a very underexplored part of the conversation on disclosures within families. I'll let you find out what it is about next week. Until then, thank you for being here once again. Another week of listening to uncomfortable, hard truths, uncomfortable facts, things that a lot of people can't even sit through. So thank you for building the stamina and thank you for building the capacity for hard things. Remember that putting the child before the case does not mean ignoring the case. It means recognizing that the greatest tragedy is not just a broken legal balance. It is a child's world that has been turned upside down. We're still inviting volunteers to join our mission, and you will find the link to join us in the descriptions. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Intercept CSA and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast so you can get notifications and be one of our first listeners. Remember that together we can intercept abuse and protect the children we all care about. Together we can intercept child sexual abuse for the future. Until next week, see you.